Okay, so you know how we're always talking about clean water for everyone? Well, today we're diving into a report about rural water systems from the Global Water Center, CARST, and the Rural Water Supply Network. And let me tell you, some of this stuff is pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, you would not believe what they're calling the biggest problem.
Oh,
Forget about old pipes for a minute.
okay.
We're talking about a major lack of qualified technicians.
Really? I would thought plumbers were, easy to find.
Right.
But this report is saying it's a huge problem.
This report makes it clear finding people with the right skills to work on rural water systems, it's practically impossible.
Wow. Like trying to find, I don't know, a unicorn riding a roller coaster.
Something like that. And it's not just knowing how to, fix a leaky faucet. These technicians have to deal with all kinds of different technologies, and often they're out in the middle of nowhere with barely any resources.
That's wild. So they need a whole different skill set.
It's a pretty unique set of skills you need to handle that.
The report actually says that infrastructure maintenance technician, that's like the hardest job to fill.
Absolutely.
Like they need to be MacGyver Andy, a water quality expert at the same time.
Exactly. You got to be able to fix a broken pump using a paper clip and some chewing gum,
Right.
But then you also need to understand how these complex water treatment systems work.
Oh, for sure.
And you got to be able to explain it all to the folks who actually live there.
Right, of course. So it's not just technical, they've got to be good with people too.
It's this whole package. Technical skills, problem solving, and being able to connect with the community.
So we're talking way more than just like wrenches and pipes here.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of skills, though, what are the biggest things these rural water heroes need to know more about?
Well, the report highlights two major gaps. One is understanding all those water supply technologies we were talking about.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the other is making sure the water's actually safe to drink.
Which I'm guessing is a lot more complicated than it sounds.
It definitely goes deeper than you might think, yeah. Imagine, for instance, having to design a well to get water out of the ground.
Okay, yeah.
You're talking about, understanding how groundwater flows underground, what kind of soil you're dealing with.
And I bet that water movement in soil thing they talk about in the report, that's not just some fancy phrase. They really need to understand that, right?
It's crucial. If you don't know how the water moves underground, you could end up contaminating the whole water supply. Or you could drill a well that runs dry after a month, and then what?
Wow, okay. So these folks, they're really important. It's a big responsibility.
Big time.
It's not just about getting the water OUT, but making sure it's good to go once it is flowing.
Exactly. And that brings us to that second competency gap we talked about, making sure the water is safe. Things like knowing how to add the right amount of chlorine to a gravity-fed system.
Okay, I'll be honest. I was picturing someone just, dumping a bucket of chlorine in there.
It's a lot more involved than that.
Yeah, I figured.
It takes careful measurements based on how much water is flowing through, and you have to understand how chlorine reacts to all the different things that could be in the water.
It's like chemistry class met a plumbing apprenticeship and they had a baby. No wonder it's tough to find qualified people. But here's something I found super interesting. The report found that men and women actually need different kinds of training.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not one size fits all.
Not at all.
For example, it found that the women in the sector often needed more support with things like managing money and making sure their water systems could last for a long time.
So it's the financial side of it and making sure it's sustainable for the long haul.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
You really start to realize how much goes into these jobs. It's incredible.
It really is. And on the other hand, the report found that the men tended to need more support with the more hands-on stuff, like fixing technical problems, repairs, that kind of thing.
Okay, so it's not just a general shortage of skilled workers. We're talking about specific things that need to be taught in different ways. And this is where that whole holistic capacity development thing comes in.
Right. You got it. And to really get into that, we need to talk about what the report says about job titles.
Oh, yeah. Or should I say, the lack of job titles.
Exactly.
That was strange.
It's a mess.
It's like nobody can agree on what to even call someone who works on rural water.
It's true.
1 minute it's wash officer, the next minute it's geologist. But they're doing basically the same thing.
Yep. And it just highlights this big problem. If you don't have standardized job titles, it's almost impossible to create training programs that actually work.
Right. How are you supposed to, recruit the right people if nobody knows what the job is even called?
Exactly. And it goes even further than that.
You can't really recognize someone's achievements or, give them a raise if you don't even have an official title for what they do.
That's right. It throws the whole thing out of whack. And this lack of clarity, it ends up affecting the entire sector.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We've got a shortage of skilled workers. We've got knowledge gaps in all these key areas. We need different training for men and women. And on top of all of that, nobody can agree on what to call these jobs. It's like a perfect storm. So what's the solution? The report has some answers, right?
It does. And they might surprise you. Because it's not just about, like, churning out more people with technical skills. We have to get to the root of the problem, the systemic issues that caused this whole shortage in the first place.
Okay, I like where this is going. Break that down for us a little. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, for one thing, the report talks about the need to create more jobs in this whole sector.
So making sure there are actual positions available for all these skilled workers we're hoping to see.
Exactly. But then you'll also have to think about incentives. Working on rural water systems, it can be tough.
Oh, yeah.
And often the pay isn't great, so we need to make these jobs more appealing.
So like competitive salaries, good benefits, maybe chances to learn and move up in your career, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting new people in the door. It's also about supporting the people who are already doing this work so they'll want to stay.
It makes sense. Create a good environment where people feel appreciated, give them the support they need, let them see a future for themselves.
That's what it's all about, creating a system that will last, that we can sustain over the long term.
And that means looking at all these different aspects, not just the technical skills.
That's the key. It's bigger than just skills.
This is already so insightful, and we're just scratching the surface, like this report keeps on giving. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to hear more about what they suggest we actually do about all this, especially when it comes to training and sharing knowledge. Even if we fix all those other problems, we still need these rural water heroes to know what they're doing, right?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that the report found some really fascinating things about how these professionals are already learning and working together.
Oh, tell me more of this. I've got to hear.
It turns out they rely on each other a lot. For solving problems, I mean.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because experience, it's often the best teacher in this line of work, you know?
Totally. So they're already kind of doing this peer-to-peer mentoring, this knowledge sharing, just out of necessity. That's so cool.
Exactly. And that's a huge opportunity. The report talks about the potential of being more intentional about it, like setting up formal mentorship programs.
I love it.
Or creating online spaces where these folks can connect with each other, learn from each other, take what they're already doing and amplify it.
Now that's smart. So what about technology? I mean, we live in the age of YouTube tutorials.
Yeah.
Surely there's a place for that in the rural water world, right?
You'd think so, right? But here's the thing. The report actually found that things like YouTube and social media, they aren't being used that much.
Really? That's kind of surprising. Why do you think that is?
You know, it's a good reminder that just having technology doesn't automatically solve everything. It made me think about a lot of things, like how comfortable are people with technology in the first place? How easy is it to get online in these remote areas? And then, even if you can get online, are those the right platforms for sharing the kind of really specific, really technical information these professionals need? It's not so simple.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I wouldn't want to be trying to fix like a well problem based on a 5-minute TikTok.
Exactly. It's not about getting rid of human expertise. It's about finding the right tools to back it up, make it even better.
Okay, so maybe not so much YouTube, but the report did mention something else about technology that caught my eye, something about mobile learning.
Oh, yeah. That's a really interesting area.
So using smartphones and stuff for training.
Exactly. It's still early days, and the report did point out some challenges, like how expensive data can be in some places.
Right.
But the potential is enormous.
Okay.
Imagine being able to access training materials, troubleshooting guides, even connect with experts, all from your phone.
That would be amazing.
Right.
Especially for people who can't easily get to a training center or people who are working really far out.
Exactly.
It's like bringing the classroom to them, wherever they are.
That's the idea. And it fits in with that whole concept of holistic capacity development we were talking about.
Mhm.
It's not just about teaching people a specific skill. It's about giving them access to the information they need when and where they need it.
I'm really liking this idea of mobile learning.
Yeah, it's got a lot of potential.
Before we move on, though, I do want to circle back to AI for a second because it's everywhere these days. And it seems like it could be really useful for some of these rural water issues we've been talking about.
Oh, absolutely. AI has huge potential here. Imagine a system that could take all that water quality data and analyze it in real time.
Okay, yeah.
So you could spot potential problems before they even happen. Or it could even recommend solutions to the technicians out in the field.
Wow. It's like having a water expert on call 247, but virtual.
Exactly. Or you could have these AI chatbots that can answer basic questions and walk people through common problems, you
Yeah.
know? That would free up the human experts so they can focus on the really tricky stuff.
Right, of course. It's about using the technology in a smart way.
Exactly. We don't want to become so reliant on AI that we forget about the human element.
Oh, no, for sure. The human side of this, that connection, it's so important.
Absolutely. It's all about balance, using AI to enhance and support the amazing work these people are already doing, not to replace them.
Well said.
Yeah.
This has been such an interesting deep dive. I'm learning so much. And it got me thinking, you know how this whole report, it's really focused on the professionals, the engineers, the technicians,
Right.
which is great and obviously super important. But it made me wonder about the communities themselves. Where do they fit in? What about their role in building a sustainable water future?
You know what? That is such a great point, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Because you're right, we often talk about rural communities as if they're just receiving the water services. They benefit, but they're not really part of the equation. But what if we flipped that? What if we started thinking of them as active partners in this whole thing? What if instead of just receiving, they were actually part of creating the solutions?
Right, because, I mean, they're the ones who live there. They know the challenges firsthand.
Exactly.
They probably have insights that even the experts wouldn't think of just from living it every day.
You're absolutely right. They're the ones who truly get what it means when a well breaks or the water gets contaminated. If we can tap into that knowledge.
Just like, instead of just giving them a solution that might work on paper, it comes from the ground up.
Right, exactly. And it's probably going to be more effective, more sustainable over time because it's coming from the community itself.
It's like that old saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach men to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Right.
But in this case, it's like help a community build their own well. And
They can manage their own water future. And this is the thing. The report, it focused a lot on the professionals,
yeah,
but this whole idea of getting the community involved, that could be the real game changer here.
totally. And think about it. If people feel like they're actually part of the solution, if they have ownership over their water systems,
Oh, absolutely.
that probably makes them way more likely to keep up with maintenance,
Yes.
to care about conserving water.
It changes everything. It's not just about building something. It's about building a sense of ownership and responsibility.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's how you create real, lasting change.
Wow. We started off talking about these technical challenges in rural water systems, and now we're talking about empowering whole communities.